Hello, we're hit 11 o'clock and we are about to do the NHS Digital Service Manual Show and Tell. So hi out there, if you're dialing in. I'm Ian Roddice. I am lead product manager for NHS Digital Service Manual, starting at 11 a.m, 11:01, so fashionably late. I think I said the same naff thing last time, so apologies for that. Welcome to the second show and tell from the team behind the NHS Digital Service Manual. Since our first show and tell in February, we've been busy, and it's only when you do events like today that you realise how far we've travelled, how much we've done, but also how much more there still is to do. So today we'll be talking about updates we've just made and our plans for the future for the NHS Digital Service Manual. Hopefully you've visited the service manual, and if not, why not? It's at beta.nhs.uk/service-manual. And since we updated the service manual in February with the front-end library and prototyping kit, we've been overwhelmed with support, both internally, but also externally. And we've been happy to join the international community of teams doing this kind of work. We've had conversations with folks from Canada, interest from Scotland, Ministry of Defence, and we had 3 Army officers come to visit us because the Army are interested in this kind of stuff. So it's great to talk about design systems, working in the open, and how we share our guidance. We planned a roadmap to the end of our financial year, which is April, and we'll talk about what's next towards the end of this session. So in terms of I'm going to call it exciting agenda for today, because I think that's what we've said elsewhere. So everyone who's presenting, we're aiming for excitement. In terms of our agenda, first we'll talk about recent updates to our accessibility guidance. The NHS UK programme worked with Nemensa to improve the accessibility of the NHS website. We built on that work to publish guidance in the service manual. We've also done some work on improving the NHS website. I should make a joke about how could we possibly improve on the award-winning NHS UK website. But we have, by embedding the front-end library into our CMS, which is Wagtail, and we'll be sharing the process and details and benefits of doing that. Really happy actually to have guests joining us from NHS Business Services Authority and from Gloucestershire. I'm going to say hospital. It's way too long. Alison can explain the full title. We'll also discuss how we've evolved our thinking around a health service standard. We talked about that in some detail in February. And we'll share progress on building a community and growing contributions by working in the open. I think internally we've got a bit of a meme that says the first 1% is the hard work, but then the 99% to get community engagement and continue sustainability is where it gets really difficult. And we'll finish by talking about our focus for the next few months and then take questions. So we are open for questions if you ping an email to service-manual@nhs.net. The email address is on the screen, and we'll obviously take questions from the floor. And now it's over to Mo to talk through our first topic.
Thanks, Ian. Hello, I'm Mohammed. I'm the delivery manager on the service manual team, and I'll be talking about our new accessibility guidance. So all of the digital products and services that we build in the NHS need to work for everyone. Here in the UK, we have almost 1 in 5 people that have a disability of some kind. Many more have situational or temporary disabilities like an illness or injury. And people who use our services could be patients, but they can also be partners, carers, parents, but also staff. They might have dyslexia, visual impairments, broken arm. They're often unwell or stressed out. A fit and healthy person can really feel the impact of a condition or injury when they can't access a service they need. It adds to their stress. And we need to make sure that things are equally accessible regardless of people's personal situation or circumstances. Now, the need to make sure products are accessible might seem obvious, but many products have issues with accessibility, and lots of teams don't know what to do when it comes to accessibility. And at our last show and tell, we talked about what we wanted to do next, and we said that we wanted to do more around accessibility. And since then, The NHS website team has been engaged with Nemensa to improve the NHS website and the accessibility around that. They did a review. They suggested improvements. They've improved some of the processes we have around testing, but they've also helped train some of the team so that we're all aware of the things that we need to do as part of our role when it comes to accessibility. Following this work with Nemensa, we took written guidance that they produced for the NHS website team, and we further developed it by designing it, testing it with users, and rewriting it. And earlier in July, we published new guidance in the service manual. So I'm now going to show you a demo of what we have. So previously, we had a few pages on accessibility within the service manual. These pages were quite high level. They were mainly links out to content that was produced by GDS on the government website. But this new guidance that we've got is more comprehensive and more useful for digital delivery teams. We structured the guidance with 3 topics that everyone needs to know about, and then there is a section here around different activities that people are involved in. So I'll show you all of these sections, and I'll run through them quite briefly. So the first section is around what all NHS services need to do about accessibility. So here we mentioned that making a product or a service accessible is actually part of the law. And to meet these requirements, you need to be at least level AA of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and that you should aim for AAA if possible. We also mention here around the fact that you need to include people with access needs in your user research. And we also mention that staff are users too. So regardless of whether a product is built for patients or staff, it needs to meet the same accessibility requirements. Just go back. So then we have a section here around how to make digital services accessible. This is essentially things to consider. So ensuring that you are thinking about accessibility at every stage, and it's not just a thing that you do at the end. Making it the whole team's responsibility. And we've got a little section here around using progressive enhancement. So you start with just HTML before you start adding more things like CSS or JavaScript. And that can help people with slow connections. And then we've got a section here around getting started with accessibility. So this came about from user research. People told us that they wanted to know about the practical activities and the people that they can speak to, like what communities exist out there that can help people as part of their learning and development when it comes to accessibility. So here we say things around booking an accessibility training session. So there's lots of good stuff that happens across government. We say things here around booking a session in an accessibility lab, trying out assistive technologies and the hardware that people might use, but also getting involved in the communities. So there's a great community across government, but also we have our own service manual Slack workspace where there's a lot of people from the design profession, content profession that can help with accessibility questions. So I'll now dive into the different activities that we've got. So this section here is, this guidance here is very much around the questions that we need to be asking if you're involved in the management of a product or if you're responsible for the delivery of a product or service. So we say things like all of the things to consider at the start of a project. For example, does the project affect people with access needs differently? Or is your project about a complex subject with lots of jargon? We also have things around, is there a reason to include easy read documents? So, asking these questions at the start of a project helps with the progress and understanding of accessibility rather than kind of leaving it till the end and then you realize that actually you've got a lot of flaws in what you're trying to build. got a section about the activities around user research. So this includes guidance on practicalities. Some of the practicalities that you might have are around, what have we got? Making your research more accessible on the day. So meeting people at the front door, giving them time to settle, accommodating space for a helper or an interpreter. And what have we also got? Okay, yeah, just scratch the top. So through the side navigation, I could also skip through to more of the guidance. The reason why we've kind of cross-referenced this on the side navigation is actually we found out that many users actually were interested in seeing what other activities the team or the product might be responsible for. So in the content guidance, we've got guidance here around writing clear content. And actually here we link to guidance that already exists on the service manual around writing inclusively, but also taking into account people's health literacy levels. We've got information here around setting page titles and headings correctly and writing good link names. When it comes to link names, we've kind of explicitly called out things like avoid ambiguous phrases such as click here or find out more. And the reason for that is if somebody's using a screen reader, that isn't going to make sense out of context. And that can add to their stress. It could take longer for them to do what they want to do, or they might not even achieve the outcome that they're trying to achieve. What you'll also notice here is that we've said, over here we say, for content design and testing. So this is highlighting the fact that this chunk of content is relevant for other activities. So jump into the design section through there. So here we've got a lot of sections which actually overlap with other activities. So things like define page structure, we've listed that this is for design and testing. Define skip links for design and testing. The headings correctly could be relevant for content. But there's also more specific things like checking color contrast and how you can meet those AA or AAA levels. And further down, we talk about components. So we advise that if you are thinking about designing a new component, that you start with something that already exists within the service manual, and then you test it with users. And if you have evidence that your user need isn't being fulfilled, then you try to create a new component. And Ben is going to touch on that a little bit later when we talk about community and contribution. So under development guidance, we have some more technical things like checking for keyboard accessibility. So, for example, if someone can't use a mouse or a trackpad and that they rely on buttons or a joystick or a keyboard and switches. We've also got some information here around making sure that your text sizes correctly and zooms correctly. People with low vision might not be able to use your service if that's not the case. And then finally, we've got guidance for testers. We talk about the types of testing. So we say things like testing with people, manual testing, automated testing. And then it's a rather long section that we've built here for testers because we feel that testers need to be aware of a lot of the activity that happens to ensure and assure that a product is accessible. So the guidance you've just seen evolved a number of times since our prototype. Early designs tested things like filtering the content. We played around with labels. I mentioned earlier that the section around getting started actually came about from user research. We've iterated on the language a number of times to make it clearer and simpler to understand. We worked with people to understand the content chunks that we need to cross-reference as well. And the bit where we say guidance by activities, that actually started off life being called guidance by role. But when we spoke to people, it became clear that actually a lot of teams won't have the specific role, but they're still very much interested in the activity. And an example of that is actually the team from Gloucestershire, and Alison's going to talk a little bit about that later. So in total, we tested with 20 people, including those with access needs. We also showed it to our friends at GDS. And we learned that although many people were aware of all of the various resources and guidance that exists out there in terms of GDS guidance, WCAG guidance, the communities, the tools, people still didn't feel quite confident that they could contribute to building an accessible service, or they didn't feel confident that they could embed a culture of delivering accessible services. And part of that is because of the complexity and the fragmentation of all the information that exists. So when we showed the guidance to people, they said it's great that it's kind of all been brought together, that it's under the NHS banner. Some of the things that people said were that they would sit together as a team and make sure we're all aware of this. We had testers say that they would include links to the guidance as part of their onboarding process. Some of them even said that they would keep this open as a tab whilst they're testing their products. And others said that essentially this is an easy guide for you to refer people to. And we had a designer that said this is a little bit like a designer's playbook for accessibility. So although the feedback has been positive so far, we want to build on the guidance. We want to publish more things that will help people embed accessibility thinking. For example, checklists or templates. So people want these kind of things because they feel that it would give them confidence that they're doing things in the right way. We'll also be building an accessibility lab in our offices in Leeds, and this is going to be based on the empathy lab that currently exists in the London office at GDS. And we'll have a roaming suitcase of accessibility equipment for London and the other regions. But it's important to note that this guidance, these suitcases, these labs, it's not a substitute for testing with real users, but it certainly is a step in the right direction. So please give us feedback on our new guidance. Please try it out, please test it, please use it. We're always looking to iterate and improve it further. So at the last show and tell, we showed the front-end library, and a number of organisations are using that now. In the last couple of weeks, we've been finalists at the NHS Digital Awards and the UK Open Source Awards. And I'm now going to hand over to Dave, who's going to talk about how the front-end library has been used to improve the NHS website.
Thank you, Mary. Hi everyone, I'm Dave. I'm an interaction designer on NHS.uk. I'll be talking about how we've improved the NHS website by implementing the front-end library. So the front-end library, what is it? It's an open source code resource that contains all the code you need to start building interfaces and websites for user interfaces for NHS websites and services. With centrally controlled, accessible, and user-tested styles and components. It's a lot. It's a mouthful. That I'm sorry. So the NHS website wasn't using the front-end library. This was simply because the NHS website was built before the front-end library. So the NHS website went live in September. I think we went live with the front-end library in January. So yep, that was the reason why. And it created a few problems for the website, including it wasn't in sync with the service manual and prototype kit. The website was not benefiting from all the accessibility improvements that were being made in the front-end library. There were lots of inconsistencies across the website with similar components and duplicate code. This resulted in a messy code base, which was a bit hard to develop, test, and maintain, thus causing a slow path to live because it took longer to develop, which cost us time and money. So the solution: get the front-end library onto the NHS website. Easy. So what we did, we began by auditing the page templates and components we had in Wagtail. Wagtail is the content management system that the NHS website uses. We printed out this really big, stuck it to the wall so everybody could see it, and it was great for creating a shared understanding of the task at hand. And in the audit, we found a total of 25 page templates, 63 components. As you can see here with the promo component, we had duplications. This was, I think we had 6 different variants of the promo component, and this was causing inconsistencies as well as bloat in the code base. So we knew some cleaning up to be done. The page templates, the existing templates, we identified a few problems. So the first one was the templates were using the outdated code because we've updated the code since in the front end library. There was also a duplicate code across the 25 page templates, as you can see here. They weren't working very smartly. So, for example, if we needed to make a code for the grid, we need to make that code in 25 different places, which was just, it wasn't easy to manage. So we started to look at how we could improve the templates. So we began by sketching out the ideas on how we could improve them. We then took that into the prototype kit so we could test it with the code from the front end library. And this is what we ended up with. So now the templates are now in sync with the front end library using the latest code. We've simplified the structure by creating 3 core layouts and 8 page template types. So they're now working a lot smarter. The templates now inherit code from one another, so reducing duplication. And this has resulted in the templates being a lot easier to update and maintain. So now if you need to make a change to the grids, you don't need to make it in 1 or 2 places. So speeding up development, time and money, it's good. So next we looked at styles and components. Like I said previously, in the audit, we had a few duplications of some components, causing inconsistencies in places, having an adverse effect on website performance and due to the file sizes. So what we did, I'll propose myself, we began by recreating the pages of the NHS website using the prototype kit. We updated those pages using the styles and components from the front-end library. I was quite confident we could style the majority of the website using the front-end library, and that proved to be about right, which was amazing. And because of that, we only had to write a small amount of custom CSS. And I'll quickly run you through the process we did that, just to share with you if you'd like to do something similar. So first thing we did, we downloaded a new copy of the prototype kit, set that up. I then copied the markup from the existing website. I chucked that into the prototype. I ran the prototype locally so I could see what it looked like. And you can see here that something wasn't quite looking right. So to fix that, I headed over to the service manual where all the updated code snippets live. So I'd copy them, add them back to the prototype. And then if it still wasn't looking good, I'd add some custom CSS, but I only ever did this if there's a real need for it. I always started with what was there first. There was no point in writing any extra code if we didn't have to. And we wanted to keep things as consistent as possible throughout the website. And then we published the prototype to the web. This was great for sharing with others, with stakeholders, and it also allowed us to do some testing. And here's what the before and after screenshots look like. So you can see not much has changed visually. Users shouldn't notice much difference, if any at all. But all the users will benefit from all the accessibility and performance improvements that we've made. And the work that we've done has reduced the CSS by a whopping 45%, which is huge. We've also made improvements to our JavaScript. We now support ES6, which is a modern version of JavaScript. It's now minified, and again, we've reduced file sizes JavaScript by 10%. And in total, we managed to reduce the page weight by 32%. So that's the total file size of the page, which the browser needs to download. So that was 0.7 megabytes, but it doesn't sound that huge a difference. It's like 0.7. But when you consider that the NHS website receives 53 million visitors per month, and around approximately 20% are connecting via a mobile network like 3G, 4G, this adds up to mobile users saving approximately 7,420 gigabytes per month, which is huge. And this is especially important to users on older mobile devices and expensive data plans. And I'll just quickly like to say thank you to Matt Hobbs. He's the head of front end at GDS for the inspiration for these stats on his blog post on front end performance. So thanks, Matt, if you're watching. And if you're interested, sorry, there's a slide missing here, which was talking about the benefits. So I'll just ad-lib this a bit. So the benefits of implementing the front-end library. The first one was page loading. So now it's quicker, which is essential to users in rural areas. We don't want to, it's for everybody. We need to make it work for everybody. The second was the accessibility. Now we're using the accessible front-end components. Again, it's for everybody. And thirdly, if I could see my notes anywhere, I cannot see my note. I'll have to get back to you on that one. I'm so sorry. I was relying on my notes too much. I'll skip to the end. So if you're interested in implementing the front-end library into your project, that'd be great. And if the first thing I'd advise is please visit beta.nhs.uk/service-manager/front-end. You'll get the information there. And we've also got teams across the NHS working in the open on .NET Core and WordPress versions of the front-end library, which is a great benefit to the NHS, so you can get involved in that as well. The way to get involved, you can get in touch with us by email, by Slack, GitHub. We're very open. I believe those details will be shown on the last slide, so you won't be missing out. And thank you for listening. I shall now hand you over to the NHS Business Services Authority.
Thank you.
Hello. Hello, I'm Helen Spires. I'm a service design lead at the NHS BSA, and I'm with me with Scott, who is one of the interaction designers. We did have Richard. He was stuck in Croatia, so apologies that he's not here today. Okay, so basically a little bit about us. You might not know who we are, but you've probably used one of our services. So we are the Business Services Authority, and we handle all of the prescriptions in England. So if you've ever had a prescription or you've ever visited the dentist, you've probably had an interaction with us. So we scan around 1 billion paper prescriptions a year to help pay the pharmacists. We then also manage the NHS pension scheme of around 2.6 million scheme members. And we also admit NHS jobs, which is why we're here today to talk about our integration with the digital front end. So I'll hand over to Scott, who's on the team.
Hi, everyone. So I just want to introduce some context as to where we were, where we are now, and what the future holds for us. So where we were initially around Christmas time, Christmas period, we were designing our service using a hybrid of the NHS BSA design system as well as Gov.uk design system. Essentially, for the designers out there, was essentially take transport out and put aerial in a nutshell. That was kind of what it was on the face of it. So the challenges that we faced when the service manual was introduced is that there is now an even bigger lack of consistency between the core NHS services. And for the BSA, it's going to become more difficult and more effort to maintain as time goes by. And we also realized that we had a choice in the matter as to whether we were to migrate over to the new design system. But we realized that by actively not choosing to move over to the new design system, we felt like we'd be a part of the fragmenting of the visual language and identity of the NHS. So we decided to kind of do a little bit of hard work up front to ensure that things go a lot smoother in the long run. So where we are right now is we've prototyped an alpha MVP in the hybrid design system, and we've started building beta. So in MVP, we've built a very, very small version of NHS jobs to allow our users to do the core functionality of the service. So people can publish adverts, people can apply for jobs, and people can do some very, very small amount of shortlisting. That's where our MVP is. We know the recruitment journey is vast, and our MVP is focused on employers being able to create and publish job adverts, candidates applying for jobs, and limited amount of shortlisting. So where we wanted to be. So around Christmas time, we became aware of a new design system that was coming out, and we were really, really eager to get on board as soon as possible with that. We were very kindly told to kind of hold our horses a little bit because it was a very new thing. It was still in production. We were really eager. And there was also a bit of a strategy from our side to kind of work out when we could do that work as well. So we always knew that we were going to do this switch, but we just had to find the best time for this actually to happen. So where we are now, NHS Jobs has just completed the migration to the new toolkit. So we've just performed all that work.
all work going forward for the project will all be used in the new toolkit. And also for the NHS BSA, the actual organisation, all services that now the BSA take on, they're going to be designed and built in the new toolkit by default. And there's also some early discussions taking place to understand if, how, and when we migrate the current live services. So there's going to be a choice in the matter with that as well. So what I'm just going to show here is just a very, very quick snapshot of something that we've got. So this was the old job advert for candidates that they would come onto and have a look to see if they're impressed by it and apply for a job. So you can see so this was the hybrid version. And you can see by the new version, it's different, but it's the same. There's a lot of visual similarities. It's a lot more in brand with the NHS now, the NHS UK, the main NHS UK website. So we felt it was really important that because of these, the kind of core services of the NHS, or the biggest ones that get the most exposure, it was really important to make sure that they were talking the same language. So how did we do this? We decided to migrate after the MVP was built. So this allowed us to keep focused on the service and actually catering for the needs of our users and getting something into the hands of our partners quicker. Using the MVP in the hybrid style for a short amount of time for our partners wasn't really any cause for concern. The key thing for us was we need to get something into their hands as quick as possible. So we consciously decided to do that afterwards. So in terms of communicating this to the development team, because we've got loads of prototypes, we have something in actual build now. The migration, it was fairly straightforward, a few hiccups, but essentially we just wanted to think in components and not pages. So all the components on the website, radios, select, they're all very, very similar to gov.uk. So what we didn't want to do, we didn't want to redesign every single prototype we had, because a lot of the components are all the same. So we just kind of went through and highlighted some of the key pages to kind of redesign to help our developers kind of do the migration work. So it was a much quicker process than we initially thought it was going to be. So the benefits that we now have by using the NHS toolkit is that the NHS Business Service Authority and NHS Digital are now closer aligned. By working from the same toolkit, we will be talking more in the same language than ever before. We've always been talking in the same language, but now that's going to shine from the outside perspective as well, because now they're going to see that everything is aligned. So it all starts from internal and it kind of like shines externally. It's minimal amount of work to align the toolkits. We're one small step closer to reversing the visual and functional fragmentation of public NHS services. We really hope this is a big stepping stone to help other services get on board with the idea that it's not as difficult as what they may think it is. There's going to be faster development, less code with consistent components and markup, which makes it easier to get stuff done. And of course, we have all the great accessibility benefits that Dave mentioned earlier. I'm going to pass back over to Helen now to talk about what the future holds for the BSA.
Yeah, so basically the future is we want to kind of design on the new research and components. We're getting a lot of feedback now, and obviously the ultimate plan is to feed that back into the master toolkit. We've also got a lot of internal components. We've got a lot of workface and services that support our colleagues that administer the services. So it's not almost public facing, but internal. So again, we're developing kind of new components there, which will feed back in. So how that kind of looks, it's a really basic model, is that we've got the master NHS toolkit. We've got our own little miniature design system. So previously, our design system was the huge component, and we were filtering from a smaller component. Now that's reversed. So NHS Digital is the large component, and our CSS is a really small component. And then there should be really, really minimal amounts of individual CSS pages within services. So it should be really easy to administer and roll out. And again, exactly what we've discussed about a consistent digital landscape. So again, the future is that we roll these out at bigger projects, starting from NHS jobs. So I'm going to introduce Alison next to talk about her services.
Oh, this one.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Richard's blog. Okay, hi, I'm Alison. I'm the User Experience Lead at Gloucestershire Hospitals Trust. And I'm going to talk to you today about how we've been using the NHS Digital Service Manual to build an internal clinical tool. So a little bit of context about us. We're a large acute hospitals trust with around 8,000 employees spread across 2 big hospitals and 1 maternity unit. We're rated good by the CQC for the quality of care we provide, but we're also really behind on technology, and most of our patient care is delivered on the basis of paper. So we're on a digital transformation journey to fix all these problems, and we want to deliver better, more usable technology for patients, but also for our staff. We've been following the development of the Digital Service Manual really closely as we were building our hospital's website last year when the Service Manual was being developed. So we missed the opportunity to use it for that initially, and we were on the lookout for something that we could try it out with. So introducing our internal clinical tool, Document Viewer. So this is a simple application which links from our patient administration system to give clinicians easy access to a range of clinical documents that are held in other systems. This tool will be really useful. There's a really clear user need for it. It's especially useful in A&E, but also in other inpatient and outpatient settings across our hospital, anywhere where clinicians need to make decisions about their patients at the point of care. So there's minimal functionality in this tool, so we thought it was, and we're building it in-house, so we thought it'd be a really good opportunity to try using the service manual to do that. So the good stuff about the service manual, we didn't have to spend ages and ages discussing how it should look, going through protracted sign-off process on designs. We had a prototype built really early on in the design process. So we had something that we could test quickly with users and make sure that we were solving their problems in the best possible way. It meant that we had the confidence that the styles and the patterns we were using had been developed following the kind of evidence-based research and testing that we can't easily do ourselves, and that the designs in the front-end library were consistent with the trusted NHS brand identity, which conveys authenticity and reliability to users. And of course, we had the confidence that accessibility, mobile responsiveness, browser compatibility had all been considered already. And that doesn't mean that we don't have to do any work ourselves, but it's a really great starting point for us. So literally, if we can do this, anybody can. We don't have an agile, multidisciplinary digital team at our disposal. We don't have a front-end developer. We have a developer in our IT department, a graphic designer in comms, and with me bringing it together and trying to make it happen, we were able to build something quickly that we could test with users. And like any project, it's not without challenges, and we're not live yet, but we've already been able to test, as I say, really quickly, much quicker than we would have been able to otherwise. So we did have to build some things ourselves, as the service manual to this point, as I understand it, has been mainly aimed at building public-facing services. So there were some things that we had to look at what else other people were doing and learn from those. We had to build a notification bar, and the main thing was the patient header, the demographic information bit, which is common in clinical systems. But everything that we did make, we've tried to share openly to make things better, adding them to the service manual backlog on GitHub. And this has already been really useful in getting instant feedback from others, and has led to further iterations. And we hope that anything we put out there might be useful in any other conversations about the future of the Common User Interface Standards or anything else. So in summary, the Digital Service Manual front-end library has enabled us to build really quickly with evidence-based, accessible components and styles. It helped us test really early on with our users, getting rapid feedback, and we hope help us deliver a useful and usable tool for our clinicians. And if anyone wants to talk to me afterwards about what we're doing and share any learning, then please get in touch. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Ian.
Thank you, Alison. That was really great stuff. Hopefully in future we'll have more folks from outside of NHS Digital telling their stories. So I'm going to give a bit of an update on the service standard work, and largely because we talked about it in February, and we talked about it in the context of the revised government service standard, which has since been published. This is the poster version from GDS. And the government service standard, if you're not aware of the role of service standard, It's a set of criteria that helps government build and run digital services that are good enough for public use. So in February, we talked about a hypothesis for a service standard for health. And our hypothesis was, we believe that a service standard for health, which acts as a guiding North Star, would help teams across the NHS deliver better services more efficiently. But actually, a lot has happened in this space since we started thinking about it in late 2018, early 2019. And DHSC, or their younger cool cousin, NHSX, have published blogs about the pipeline assurance model. This is one from Sam Martin in April. Nearer to home in the NHS UK programme, we're developing our self-assessment processes, which supports and are part of the pipeline assurance model. But we still have a mental model, and I keep rolling out this pyramid diagram, A, because I did it, and B, hey, Stephen Gill in Gov used it in one of his slide talks, so it must be okay. And this idea of a pyramid of content gives a sense of a standard to aim for, some guidance as to how to get there. You've heard about accessibility guidance. Previously, we talked quite a lot about our content guidance, and helpful links out, whether it's to other parts of NHS, NHS Digital, NHSX, or to Gov. So we think that is still useful, but we've refined our thinking in this space based on our user research. And we're focusing on 3 key areas we think maybe we should talk about a bit more in terms of assessing health services. And these are supporting a culture of care, making your service clinically safe, and building for interoperability. So I'll just talk a little bit on all of these. So one could argue that in health, face-to-face contact is always essential to meeting the user need. And in those interactions, you hope for empathy, compassion, professionalism, knowledge, and ultimately care. So we hypothesized about what a standard for talking about care could look like in the spirit of the GDS service standard. Because caring is a core value for most NHS organisations, and it's one of the CQC's 5 inspection domains. Clinicians have told us that compassion is a key differentiator for the NHS compared to other digital services. And it came up in our work on content principles. So we've used the word caring rather than compassionate, as we think caring might be easy to measure. And it's important to demonstrate care in the design of health services. So again, this is a hypothesis. It's something we want to keep talking about. And it may be a no-brainer, but to restate, we have to think about clinical safety and effectiveness in what we build, in services we design and build, but also to explain, for example, why it's hard to do user research in an A&E, actually in an emergency ward, when we know doing user research is a key part of passing a government GDS assessment. So there's some things about doing UR in health which are different. And because clinicians fed back, there probably should be a separate standard for clinical safety. So I hypothesized about what a standard in the spirit of government could look like that talks about clinical safety. And so it reminds that we have the potential to do harm as well as do good, that we need to manage the risks, and that digital services in the NHS should have a nominated clinical safety officer. And finally, we need systems to talk to each other. We hypothesized about standard to do with interoperability, because it's fair to say that NHS technology is diverse and often doesn't share data well, which could mean patients could be less safe, for example, when being referred between services. And of course, the Secretary of State called it out in his policy paper in October 2018, and since reinforced in NHS Digital and NHSX blogs and posts. And so what next? In terms of the service manual team, we've paused our work in this space. I think we've found some stuff out, but the context has changed. So we're kind of in a pivot point. But we expect to be picking these conversations up with Hilary and Sam in NHSX so we can support the pipeline assurance model. If, like Alison or BSA, you're building stuff in this space, we all need to know that building stuff in this way will support you on an assurance journey. And ultimately, we did a wave, hi. But because we think it helps teams understand what good looks like when delivering services in health. So I'm going to hand over to Ben now to talk about contribution. I will remind, as the slide says, any questions, particularly difficult ones, we love difficult ones around clinical safety or anything like that, send it to service-manual at nhs.net. I am now going to hand over to Ben to talk about contribution and community.
Thank you, Ian. My name is Ben. I'm an interaction designer on the NHS website. I'm going to talk about contribution and community for the service manual. So I'm going to take you through what we've done, what does this mean, and what's next. So what have we done? So since the last show and tell, we had a huge celebration because we released a contribution process. And this contribution process allows us to enhance current components that we have in the manual, gaining feedback from a wider community and with users, people testing with users in different contexts. And it also helped us find gaps where we weren't meeting user needs. So here's a really simple diagram of how the contribution process works. And before I go through it, it's worth reiterating that we recommend using existing components first and testing with your users in your context, and only follow this process if the existing components aren't meeting your users' needs. So with this, you have a new thing, you check if it is actually a new thing. Does it already exist on the backlog? Someone else already raised this. If someone else has already raised your thing, add all your services evidence, what's not working, why is it not working, in what context. And if your thing doesn't exist in our backlog, you can add a ticket and again, add evidence. It's all about gathering evidence. So as you can see from the last diagram, everything is based around a backlog. And similar to Gov, we manage our backlog in GitHub. The benefits of GitHub is that it's open and transparent. Everything we were working on there, all conversations are on there and statuses of where things are. And it's really helped us open up conversations beyond NHS UK to involve teams across NHS Digital and then wider health and social care. We've borrowed a lot of these processes, like I said, from Gov, who use it to manage their design system, but we've gone one step further and we're getting our content designers involved, using it to manage the style guide changes as well. And the benefits of getting the content designers involved is that it brings the content in line with the processes for contributing components and patterns, which involve designers and developers. And we can now link between issues from different backlogs of components. Care cards, for example, that touched upon, obviously the wording is huge to that, but there's the design and the development. So this is an example of our content style guide backlog. So as you can see on here, it's words and phrases that people are chewing over and testing with users. So we have PMS. So is it best as PMS or premenstrual syndrome? And then we've got some really tricky issues like the pain scale, which is out there in the wild. And it's like, is it a pain scale or is it actually helping people to know whether or not their pain is severe enough to get urgent and emergency care? So what does all this mean? We have a community. And a really active one as well. We have 361 members on Slack, 80 of which are active weekly, and they're sharing work, asking for help, helping others. Our GitHub, it has 341 likes, which is great. We can monitor public GitHub projects, so that's people that are uploading the prototype kit, and we have 70 of those. That means lots of people are working on using our stuff. They're building in different contexts, they're testing with users, and all this knowledge, all this testing and broad spread is helping the manual grow and improve with valuable insight, which is going to, in the end, benefit everyone. So I'm going to take you to our community in action, if I can do the swipe right. So this is an example of a live ticket on our GitHub backlog. So Dave Evans, shout out to Dave, who works on the NHS e-referral service. He has proposed a ticket for a patient details header. So he's briefly outlined what it is, an example of what they're working towards, why they're doing it, the research that they're going through. And as you can see on the ticket, we have Simon Davis, who's a researcher on e-referrals, who's given an update of the research. We have, scroll down a bit more, Dan Johnson, who's working on the summary care record. So he's sharing the work that he's doing in the same space and the problems, why it changed. And if I keep on going, we've got Alison, who presented earlier, who's also sharing the work that they're doing on this. So you're seeing this is really useful, valuable conversation that's out in the open. And it's getting teams together. Now, can I get back to this? You click. Oh, I made it. Nice one. Yeah, so community benefits, we're already realizing the benefits of having a community. This is an example of Dan, who I referred to there, who works on summary care records. And he's saying he wishes he started to open up the backlog sooner, and this kind of feedback that he's getting is invaluable. And it's has asking questions that he should have asked yonks ago. So it's the benefits are it's getting people together quicker. By sharing work in progress, teams are finding commonalities earlier, which is stopping costly duplication, and it's avoiding others' past mistakes. And all this is being fed back into the manual, and it's improving our documentation, patterns, components, which in turn, again, is improving your stuff. So what's next for our community? So we need you. The community's, it's no one without people. We need people to be involved, to be active in conversations, to share their work, to feedback on work. Because more minds are better than one, obviously. So if you're working in user-centered design or health, please get involved. We're particularly interested in user insight, research, analytics, and any gaps that we currently have. So what's next for our community is we're going to continue to facilitate valuable conversations, but we're also going to look at helping more people get involved, starting with our content design community. We're doing some initial hand-holding sessions for content designers to get started on GitHub, because it can be quite scary at first to get tickets in the backlog and how they work through it. We also have one of our senior designers up in Leeds, Andrew Duckworth, is going to run a Just Enough HTML and CSS course for our content designers. And then we're going to look into sessions of how they can just work with this code and GitHub, getting it all together. So as I said before, please, can you get involved? I realize we do not have the GitHub link on here, which kind of sucks, but you can get to it by going to the service manual, looking at components in the bottom, we link out to that. You can email us, and please get involved on Slack. There's some great conversations on there. And I shall now pass you to Mr. Woods.
Thanks, Ben. Ben's walking away with our stickers though, put on the floor for placement. So what next? We're planning to the rest of the financial year to April 2020, and our next mission to October will focus on forms and questionnaires, do some topics and guidance. Some of you will know we've been working with Caroline Jarrett, the woman who wrote the book on forms. Hi, Karen, if you're out there. We'll be looking to embed the design system even more into our operating practices internally, building on the work earlier you've heard about. But also think about how we can increase use and contribution. And I think sharing notes with folks in GDS for things like GitHub training for content designers. So GitHub is not just for front-end developers. We think it's also for content designers. And we'll be building on, I say not an information standard. Some of you may know we assure our content based on the NHS England information standard, NHS England, NHS, I guess, maybe now, a change in the model, and we're going to be doing some work to build on our content guidance and content style council to think about how we might formalize the process we use internally for QA of our own content and share that. Also, more accessibility. As Mo said, I think we're making real the accessibility lab and the accessibility equipment in the suitcase. We'll be working with colleagues in NHS Hex to help support the pipeline insurance model with the hope that all of our work, if you follow our guidance, it will help you in a long way in terms of the assurance and helping you build good products, I think, as we've seen from colleagues from NHS BSA and from Gloucestershire. And yeah, we'll be pushing on a user research repository. I alluded to some of the challenges around doing user research in health, which may be different to other digital services. And we think we've got a good story to tell there. So we've done some work internally about user research repository, and we should be talking about that more publicly at our next show tell. And what better than to end this presentation with a smiling picture of Matt Edgar. If you don't know Matt, head of design, and I want his photographer to come and visit us. But I wanted to mention the blog Matt recently published about withdrawing the NHS common user interface. You've heard around patient headers, clinical facing systems. The common user interface is our kind of design information guidance, which has been around for a number of years. And if you read Matt's blog, it is now deprecated to, I think, June 2020. And Matt has put a shout out for interested parties to raise questions and queries. And because we'll be looking to coincide our work with what next for QE. I think you've heard from Alison and BSA. Our work is a good starting point if you're in that space, and there will inevitably be some patterns particular to clinical facing systems. And why would you not start or build on and kind of meet these needs? So yeah, and as I say, don't we all feel good? We feel very good anyway because it's gone well, and we're at minute 55, I think, which means our timing is really good. And we're ending with a smiling picture of Matt. So yeah, questions either from the floor, or shall we take the floor first, and we have some from online. So from the floor, and particularly other folks who've presented, if you want to be near and on hand, and near the microphone, more importantly. So any questions? Shall we go online, Mo?
Sure. Okay, so we've got a few questions here. If we don't get around to answering all of them that have come through the inbox, we will respond later on today. It's also worth noting that the slides will be up and the recorded version of this will be up on the NHS Digital YouTube channel. So we'll make sure that there is a transcript and speaker notes within the slides. And I know there was a couple slides missing, but we'll make sure that that's in there as well. So we've got a question here around what methods do you use to prove the level of accessibility before putting changes in front of users? So everything that we mentioned in the accessibility testing section, so the activities for testers, are things that we do on the NHS website, particularly around testing with users, but also manual and automated testing. So we have a library of scripts that we would use and tools that we use. And all of that information should be within the guidance. And if not, we'll respond individually with a bit more detail. There's a question here around WordPress version of the front-end library. So somebody is interested to know where this need is coming from. So the need for a WordPress front-end library, I think, originally came from the NHS Leadership Academy.
So Chris Witham, hopefully you're out there, Chris,
Yeah.
has certainly been tweeting about it. And so maybe at some point we can join up with Chris online. We'll come back to that.
But it's of benefit to a lot of trusts who use WordPress as a content management system and an easy way for someone with not very much technical skills to be able to update content and make changes to their websites or any informational services that they have. So there is a need to kind of make those websites and services more accessible and load faster and look more consistent with what people are used to as part of like the NHS website.
Is it worth saying that we're not actually doing that work?
Yeah.
It's the community that's actually building on that. It's not something that we're doing.
It's not a key focus of ours, but we welcome all contributions and we understand folks' needs. WordPress is a good tool, particular need, and we welcome all comers, I think it's fair to say, Ben.
Yeah. Any questions from the floor?
I had one about the NHS job site, the BSA comments. And what control or what influence can you bring to the content of the job ads and descriptions? Because they're notoriously sort of jargon heavy and long and difficult to get through.
And if we repeat the question for the benefit of the recording and the audience,
Sorry.
do you want to repeat the question?
Speaking to you.
Yeah, so we've been doing quite a lot of work around job adverts in particular. We have a lot of pain points. We hear from candidates that job adverts aren't very enticing to apply for. This then kind of goes in a huge spiral because candidates are then applying for jobs with muddled up job adverts, which means that there's low quality applications coming through. So the root of the problem is the way that the job adverts are getting put out there and the encouragement of writing better adverts. So there's a big pain point for employers around having a lack of time to do this. So we have been working very closely with a lot of employers to work out what we can do to help them write better job adverts. So one of the key focuses around our MVP was addressing one of those big pain points around better job adverts. And part of that is kind of not eradicating it, but minimizing the use of PDFs. So typically they put Word documents online. MacBooks, Windows, iPhone, Android all handle PDF very, very differently. So we're trying to create a kind of singularity experience. So it doesn't matter what device you're using, you're always going to access the same high quality content that we're trying to push out. So we're actively changing the way that employers are putting these job adverts onto the service.
Another content designer on your team.
Massively, yeah. They're doing a lot of good work with them. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
One more question.
We have one more question that's come in on email. So someone's suggesting, so the framework, the NHS UK front end, is it just for patient-facing applications, or can it be used on applications that are not patient-facing, such as an internal admin system? Well, for example, the evidence we showed from the community, ERS, that is their admin system, that is their patient professional-facing system. So it can be, and it is being used. I've lost the question, but
And I think colleagues from BSA said that well when they were talking about components, you know. So when you get to designing a pattern and you have some particular, we know generally that drop down can be not a good idea, but we also know that looking at patient systems and drop downs with names or medicines and so on are an inevitability probably.
Yeah.
So I think, and this is why we gave a name check and shout out to the QE work. At the granular level, the components, the templates, the building and accessibility, the content guidance, all the stuff we've talked about before, like health literacy, speaking in the same way. And certainly accessibility, in previous research, we've had folks say, does it apply to staff-facing systems? Well, of course it does. Staff are people, obviously, but they're users. So our starting point is this should all be a good base starting point for any system, whether it's public, people, staff. And what we're really interested in, I think, as the QE work goes forward, is how we can add to it for either components or patterns that are more applicable to staff and clinician facing. Personally, I'd be really disappointed if you had a real divide, because, you know, folks are working on staff facing systems as well as people facing systems. So yeah, good starting point. It's an exciting year ahead for work on the QE, and I'm sure at one point we'll get Matt on camera and not just a static photo of his face. He looks even better in real life if you've not met Matt.
and also that's good reason why you should join the community and feedback. Test these in your context and let us know how it works.
Any other questions? We're 3 minutes over, but I think that's fine. We've done 107 slides, and who knows how many people have been dialing in. If no other questions, we'll be around for a little bit after. We're always happy to receive virtual contact. Join the community. Dial in next time. We haven't got a date, I'm pretty sure. I fancy a festive gig at Christmas. Mr. Dean Vipond in the front row looks great in the Santa outfit. I have the photos in my Twitter stream. I can feel the run out of the Santa outfit. So I guess it's for everyone here, it's just saying thanks, everyone. So.